Hello and a very warm welcome. I'm Rahul Kanwal. You're watching the Board of India Today Economists. Over the next 1 hour, we'll be joined by some of the sharpest economic minds in this country as we debate and discuss what the Modi government ought to do to jumpstart the Indian economy. Multiple dire signals emerging over the last few weeks. How much of a downturn is the economy in and what can be done to stimulate growth? That's our big discussion point tonight. Joining us on this special broadcast, I want to begin by introducing Dr. Ashok Lahiri. He's been former Chief Economic Advisor. Also with us at this time is Professor Arun Kumar, one of India's most acclaimed economists. Surjit Bhalla, Chairman Oxis Investments, also one of the sharpest minds in the economy. With us, our Editorial Director, Publishing at India Today magazine, Raj Chingappa. I also want to introduce via satellite link a special guest and an economic mind in his own right, Jayant Sinha, joining us on this broadcast, Minister of State for Civil Aviation. Welcome to all our guests. I want to take the first question up front. Question number one on our broadcast: what steps should the Modi government take to revive the economy? Remember, over the last few days, we've seen multiple voices in government talk about the need for stimulus, a package possibly to revive the Indian economy. And here are 5 signals which suggest why this is important. Remember, the latest GDP figures that just came out for the quarter from April to June suggested that this is the lowest growth we've seen in the last 3 years at a rate of 5.7%. This is as per the changed GDP numbers. Otherwise, it could be possibly lower than this. Industrial growth for the month of July down to 1.2%. It was 4.5% last year. Then there is retail inflation, which has crept up to 3.36%, which is the highest in the last 5 months. You've also got the current account deficit at 2.4% of GDP for the quarter of April to June, which is the highest in 4 months. And you've got private investment, which is growing very sluggishly. And also, the Center for Monitoring of the Indian Economy suggesting that there were 1.5 million jobs lost in the first 4 months of this year. So, there is a problem. How dire is that problem? What should the government do to try and revive the economy? I put that question first to Dr. Surjit Bhalla.
Look, if you identify the problem, you can converge towards a solution, what the government should do. But it's not clear that we have identified the problem. For example, you say that retail inflation rose to 3.34%. Now, is that a problem? Is that why, we were talking about 11% inflation sometime back, not more than 3 years ago. Inflation has gone up from 1.5 to 3.5 in the last 3 months. For the last 13 months, inflation is 3.3%. This is the best inflation number that India has ever had. So let's rule that out as a problem for the economy. That's the good news of the economy, is that the inflation is low. So that's number one. Second, in terms of what they can do, I don't think they can do very much, unfortunately. They have done a lot. If you look at how much expenditures have been involved in public administration and defense in the last quarter, it rose at something like, in real terms, something like 18-19%. That's good. But the point is, the economy cannot be revived by government spending more money. It helps. I'm not saying it doesn't help. Last part that they can do something is move more aggressively on the bad asset problem, balance sheet problem. But the biggest elephant in the room, and I don't think the government can do anything about it, is the really very high real rates of interest that the Indian economy has. It has this 3rd highest real rates in the world. There is no other economy besides Brazil and Russia, maybe Zimbabwe, but that has 1,000% inflation, and therefore we can't really. Real rates, I'm talking real rates of interest, are the 3rd highest in India.
Reuters put out a story yesterday which talks about a possible stimulus package. This has been done in the past. They put out a figure of between 40 to 50,000 crores, which essentially is just 0.3% of the total economy. Would that even be enough? Let me just take you through some of the points in that Reuters story. There's a lot of buzz that early next week the government could put out a stimulus package. There have already been indications from the finance minister that the prime minister will announce something. So here's what they're looking at. They're looking at the possibility of maybe loosening the fiscal deficit targets, also pushing up government expense even further, although you just heard Surjit Bhalla say increasing government expenditure is not the only way to revive the economy. This excessive extra expenditure could widen fiscal deficit from 3.2 to 3.7%. Government looking to spend more on the recapitalization of banks, the rural jobs program and housing. Jayant Sinha, Surjit Bhalla points out very interestingly that the government is continuing to spend, but one of your biggest problems seems to be that despite the fact that you've got a Modi government here, despite the fact that this government is supposed to be pro-business, private investment is simply not taking off. Why do you think that's the case? What can the government do to fix that problem?
Rahul, first of all, it's very important that we don't over-interpret one quarter's numbers. So we really have to look at the longer term trends. We have to understand the fundamental structural changes that are happening in the economy and then ask ourselves what is it that we can do to accelerate these very important structural changes. So I am not too worried about what has happened in one quarter. I'm much more interested in what's happening at a structural level. Now, the transformational changes that we brought about in the economy, the formalization of the economy through GST, through demonetization, the changes in public financing, the changes in monetary policy, the JAM, DBT, all of these very profound structural changes that are underway are setting the stage for very solid and very robust growth in the long term. That's the structural adjustment that the economy is going through. We are changing from an old style of doing business which was quite corrupt and was very crony capitalist oriented and which was, ridden with black money and so on. All of that that was happening in the past. Since our government has come to power in May 2014, we are fixing all of that and setting the stage for much more robust and much better growth going forward. Now, are there ways in which we can accelerate that structural transformation? That's where I think the stimulus comes into place. That's where we can get more investment. And there, all the things that you spoke about, which Surjit has also highlighted, bringing down real interest rates, capitalizing the banks better, doing more public investment, getting more money into affordable housing. These are the kinds of ways in which the structural transformation that's happening in the economy, that's very important for the long run of the economy to create jobs, to drive investment, that we accelerate those structural transformations.
Okay, that's an important point you make, and let me put that question to Dr. Ashok Lahiri. This is something we've heard from the government multiple times, that don't get taken in by negative numbers that have come out in the short term, because what you're seeing is an extensive overhauling of the way business is done in India. The GST, demonetization, the corruption again, the fight against corruption, these will create initial roadblocks and problems, but in the long run, it will lead to a newer, cleaner way of doing business. This is a short-term hiccup for long-term gain. Do you buy that?
I do. The reason is that, see, with 5.7% growth, we are almost in mourning. Don't forget, 1980 to 2013, the annual compound growth rate of the Indian economy was 6.2%. So 5.7%, nothing to cheer about. But again, we can't be feeling that as if we are in great recession. That's not the case. And furthermore, there are structural changes that are taking place. Now, you need not spend money only, you need to spend the money well. On the point about the real rate of interest, Surjit, my friend, has engaged the greats like Raghuram Rajan. There may be people who disagrees with him that in this
Arun
case...
Kumar, do you agree with the assertion that Jayant Sinha just made, that this is a short-term hiccup for substantial long-term gain?
No, I think he's right that we need to look at it in the long-term perspective, and therefore if we see in the last 6 quarters the rate of growth has been declining. It started declining before demonetization, it started declining faster after that. Now the rate of growth of 5.7% is overstated, because as the RBI has said, as the economic survey said, we haven't got the data from the unorganized sector.
That the real impact of demonetization, Jayant Sinha,
services price
it is argued was on the unorganized sector. The 5.7 figure for the last quarter which came out doesn't include the unorganized sector, and therefore when the revised estimates come out, the number could be far worse. So the situation on our hands, Arun Kumar argues, is a lot worse than what we know. Do you think that's correct?
Well, I mean, I can't say what's going to happen once the adjustments to the latest quarter come in. I don't think we should waste too much time on that. Exactly as Arun Kumar is saying, we've got to look at the longer term trends, and the longer term trends demonstrate that the economy has been slowing over the last 6 quarters. That's absolutely clear. That is the trend that we should be concerned about. But what that is actually reflecting is exactly what I was just saying, that we are shifting gears in the economy in the long term. We are shifting gears, we are going from sort of third gear to fourth gear. When you shift gears, there's a bit of a slowdown and then you accelerate from there. And the reason why there is this longer term, sort of shift is because, as I said, the economy is being reset from the crony capitalist economy with large amounts of black money, a lot of bending of the rules, all of that happened in the previous regime, to a much better way of doing business. And the proof of the pudding lies in the FDI eating. You'll see what has happened to FDI. Capital that wants to come in and invest in good projects, that wants to invest in projects where there is clarity, where everything is being done in an above board way, that capital, the FDI capital, has been accelerating. It's been growing very quickly. And that demonstrates the structural shift that is happening in the economy. So we just have to be a little bit patient. We have to advance some of our efforts to further boost public investment, and that's exactly what we're doing.
Let us take capacity utilization, that it is low. If you read the RBI reports, if you read anybody for the last several years, capacity utilization, at least for 3 years, has been in the doldrums. Every RBI document, every RBI document points out that capacity utilization is low. Every RBI document points out that we've got a real NPA problem. There's nobody investing. Now, so that's the first amuse. Third, if you will, on the GDP numbers being actually much lower because informal industry is not included, that is just plain wrong. Because they make estimates. Everybody makes estimates. When the full data comes in, the full data comes in. But let us not impugn the CSO, they are professionals over there. They know that these data come in later. Not all of the data comes in. There are assumptions made from the formal sector with the informal sector. You might claim that that relationship is now weakened because of demonetization. Right. You might claim whatever. But let's not come out and say, okay, this is the case. And I didn't quite get that the inflation rate is actually higher than this. Because I quite honestly didn't get that. So there are 5 of these factual things, which, I can't even start at ground zero. Last, my good friend over there, Ashok mentioned something about, and didn't complete, Raghuram Rajan on interest rates or something. Everywhere, and this is a very serious point, and I challenge you. I challenge all of you over here. You find me any country in the world besides India where they are having a round table on the economy, where the economy is assumed to be in doldrums, and the number 1, number 2, and number 3 item of discussion is not interest rates. Why is that the case? I just want to ask Ashok Lahiri, our good friend over here, Arun Kumar, why is it the case?
Unreasonable?
Please understand my question. There's not one country in the world
interest rates further. The government has been pushing as much as it possibly can.
Right. But you see...
No, the government can't push the RBI
They've been indicating...
That's not the issue.
Yeah, sure.
And they shouldn't and they won't. That is absolutely not the issue over here. The issue is, why aren't we as economists discussing what is responsible for the downturn?
Macroeconomics tells us that when capacity utilization is low, then accelerated as an act and investment therefore slows down.
Yes, exactly. Other people invest besides capacity utilization. They are 60% of the economy is service.
So the point I'm making is that when capacity utilization is low, investment is not going to come through, because if you're already down to 65 or 70% and you have spare capacity, why would you invest? That will only lead to further losses. And the second point is expectations are down, because demonetization led to expectations coming down, and now GST has caused so much confusion that people are not investing because their expectations are that there's confusion. And especially the unorganized sector has been hit. Unorganized sector, which is 45% of the GDP, okay, 31% is non-agriculture. If that is down and that is this thing, then demand is down. And that's why when demand is down, capacity utilization is down.
So the one problem about which there can't be much of an argument, and I want to put that question to Rachingappa, is the big jobs crisis in India. And I just want to put out some data. Let's just take it one by one. On the one side, you've got 30.67 lakh people who are being trained. What should the government really be doing to create new jobs? You've got 30.67 lakh people entering the job force, the work economy, but out of these only 2.9 lakh are currently being offered placements. CMIE estimates that 1.5 million people lost their job between January and April 2017. The unemployment rate in 2013-14 was 4.9. That now has gone up to about 5% in 2015-16. How serious a problem? And India Today had a big story out on jobs, and I just want to put out, before I get Raj to respond, data about layoffs, because that frankly is what people are most worried about. You've got the IT sector, which is cutting up to 2 lakh jobs over the next 3 years. Studies suggest that 2 lakh people could be rendered jobless over the next 3 years. You've got top line companies like Infosys, TCS, Tech Mahindra that are cutting their workforces in the pink papers, headlines out almost every day. Even Wipro, Cognizant have announced layoffs. But that's not the only problem. So you've got on the one side layoffs in the IT sector, then you've also got job losses in the manufacturing sector and in weaving power looms, especially in a place like Surat. So Raj, is that the real #1 problem for the government? What should they be doing?
Undoubtedly. I mean, there's no, if you look at what's happened, there's a lot of negative stuff that's going on when the economists here have talked about it. The only positive that I see, and addressing the job crisis directly, is that the government is not in denial. And we've seen those statements.
No, but the government is in denial to some extent, because they say that this 1.5 million figure, or the fact that there are only 1.5 lakh jobs being created, doesn't incorporate Skill India. This is Labour Ministry data. It doesn't look at entrepreneurship, new startups. So they are in some extent not agreeing.
I'm talking about the economy and the downturn that is there. I think the government fully understands that this is a huge crisis, from whatever I've gathered. Now, how do you then do things? I mean, if you look at jobs and what you do in terms of stimulating it. Sujit was mentioning public expenditure. I think that the government has been hinting very clearly that it is going to infuse a lot of public money, because they understand the banks are not able to lend anything, because no one wants to borrow that. So what I think you're going to see in the next couple of months is probably their most determined, and very importantly for the government, because they're heading into a lot of assembly elections. They've got 2019 not far away, and this is going to be their #1 priority. How do you get the economy back on track again?
30.67 lakh people are entering the economy as supposedly trained people, and out of them only 2.9 are getting offered placements every month. That is a crisis that is brewing. And that's a crisis that could blow up in the government's face unless you're very quickly able to find some solutions. What can these solutions be?
Rahul, the truth is that jobs are the top priority for every government around the world most of the time. So nothing is new in that regard. Jobs are a high priority. I also want to correct a misimpression that Arun Kumar, I think, has been putting out, which is that if you have high real interest rates, it does nothing for the economy because capacity utilization is low. Capacity utilization has not been as high as we would like it to be, but you're missing the fact that real interest rates have a huge impact on the demand side as well. When real interest rates come down, the cost of borrowing comes down. You buy more consumer durables like cars, like fridges, like TVs and so on. That provides a big consumption demand boost, and that obviously raises capacity utilization, and the economy goes off in its growth spiral. So real interest rates are very important. They're very important for creating jobs, for raising capacity utilization and so on. And when it comes to jobs, Rahul, you have to look at jobs in a complete way. Certainly there are jobs in the organized sector and they are not growing as strongly as we would like, but when we look at jobs in the entrepreneurial sector, which is not picked up as well, or when we look at jobs in the informal sector, that's when you begin to see that actually it's a much more vibrant picture than you are painting it out to be.
Is the job market in the country at this time in a crisis situation, and do you believe the government is in denial?
I don't think the government is in denial. Only 10% of the employment is in the organized sector. We need large-scale manufacturing, and that is one thing that we need to have on a large scale.
Surjit Bala, your thoughts? Are we in the midst of a job crisis? There is, of course, a problem, but some of these, I just want to...
We have been in the midst of a job crisis since 2004. I hope some of the economists will look at the data. Between 2004 and 2011, the average job growth per year was 0.8%.
But the Modi government was supposed to fix that.
Let me answer. First of all, we have been in crisis, if you will. So let's again, we're making the same mistake that the economics roundtable is there and the government can solve, but not interest rates. That is my beef against you guys. Literally beef against you guys. Okay?
Beef is a dangerous word. We don't want any vigilante groups outside our office.
That's number one. Now, the problem, and I think this government is very sincere about helping solve the job problem by changing labor laws. Labor laws are your biggest constraint. I don't think a little bit of package of 0.5% of GDP is suddenly going to solve the job problem. Get real, guys. Okay? We have a genuine job problem for a long time. Half of it, if you will, is, or 3/4 of it is labor laws, which don't allow people to hire and fire. The government is trying to get around it by this mudra business, give them little this.
I want to continue this. We'll talk about jobs when we come back. We'll also talk about the one issue that's been in the public eye the last several days, about petroleum pricing. Jayant Sinha's party and government now under immense pressure, also from the Aam Aadmi and the opposition, saying reduce petroleum pricing at a time, and we've got some very interesting data that shows that the actual price is just 51% of what you're paying. So that 50% bump, should the government be slashing that in the interest of the Aam Aadmi? That and more when we come back to this very important and engaging Board of India Today economist discussion on the state of the Indian economy. We return in 2 minutes. Stay with us. Big India Today Board of Economists discussion on the state of the Indian economy. I want to introduce our guests, starting with Dr. Surjit Balla. With us also on this broadcast, Professor Arun Kumar, Dr. Ashok Lahiri, Gurcharan Das, author, columnist, former CEO of Procter & Gamble, my colleague in India Today magazine's editorial director, Raj Chingappa. With us also, Jayant Sinha, Minister of State for Civil Aviation. I want to focus now on the big issue of petroleum pricing. The opposition drumming this up in a big way, clearly generating traction from the Aam Aadmi, because the Aam Aadmi naturally wants all costs to come down. The government says this is for your own good because this is helping the government build infrastructure. Here is the data out for you. Should the Modi government slash duties on petroleum pricing? Let me tell you the breakup of that 1 litre of petrol that you buy from a gas station. Roughly, the retail price of petrol is about 70 rupees 38 paisa. Out of this, the price that the dealer pays is actually just 30 rupees 74 paisa. That's about 43% of the overall price. You got an excise duty component of about 21.5 rupees, which is about 30% of the total. Then you've got dealer commission, which is about 3.24 rupees, which is 5% of total. You've got VAT, value added tax, at 14.96%, which is 21%. So essentially, you've got the dealer paying only 43% of the price that you pay. The rest of it goes in taxation. Same is the case with diesel. The average price about 58.72 rupees. You've got the dealer paying 30.54 of this, which is 51%. Excise duty is a whopping 30%, which is 17.33. Dealer commission is 4%, which is about 2.18 rupees. VAT is 15%, which is 8.67%. The retail price is 58. So you are paying double of what it costs the government. Jayant Sinha, when the argument is put out like this, at a time when people are feeling the pinch, they're saying this is the government robbing the Aam Aadmi. This tax, the duty structure must change. The Aam Aadmi must pay much lesser than he does for petrol and diesel. How much of a problem is this going to be, and will we actually see petroleum pricing being slashed?
Well, obviously we would like all prices to be as low as possible. That being said, you have to remember that the taxes that we've imposed on petroleum products have helped us a great deal in bringing down the fiscal deficit and bringing down inflation. So by bringing down inflation, that has helped the Aam Aadmi tremendously. The vast majority of the taxes that we are collecting as far as petroleum products are concerned are in fact going to the states, and the states are using it for all the basic necessities that people want as well, which is roads, clean water, education, health. So the taxes that we get from petroleum products help in many different ways. As I said, they bring down inflation, they improve the fiscal deficit, they enable us to invest in infrastructure, in all the basic social services that are required, and finally, in a very important way as well, they also act as a carbon tax so that we regulate our usage of carbon-based fuels and transition to renewable energy as well.
But Arun Kumar, at a time when the government has said that this is market determined, that the pricing will change every day, depends on what's happening globally, now crude prices are firming up, but for the last several years you've actually got crude prices very low, and the government then says, oh, we need this because it's for your own good. Do you buy that argument?
No, I don't buy, because you see, after all, this is a basic good. It goes into everything, and there's no sort of subsidy for it, there's no input credit for it, so therefore it's very inflationary, you know, because everything else will go up with it. What I also see is that this reflects a failure of the policy because of demonetization and GST. It was expected that GST would collect more taxes, but they are afraid that because the tax collection will go down. In the first one, 93,000 crores was collected, but now it comes out that 63,000 crores of input credit is being claimed, so very little indirect tax will be collected. So they are worried the fiscal deficit will go down. So in other words, it's a failure policy as it is.
Doesn't agree.
And that's why, you know, I think it's coming.
I'll tell you.
Why should petroleum prices not come down?
See, petroleum has got a very tortuous history. Right from the time from 1970s, when Mrs. Gandhi nationalized the foreign petroleum companies, by the same argument that it's a universal intermediate, the price must be kept low, and all. I mean, it's a complex system that we introduced. Now the argument is being given. Now what the government is trying to do is to dismantle this administered price mechanism. If petroleum prices were going up because the government is increasing taxes, it's not going up. The argument that is being made is that crude prices have gone down. Forget what has happened to the refined international products. Reduce taxes so that refined products are available to the people at lower rates. That argument seems to me to be very tenuous.
No, but you know, the economists can say what they will, Gurcharan Das. The reality is the Aam Aadmi says, boss, 50% tax? You know, I should be paying half of what I'm paying for this. This is also an issue that is generating much public traction. The pressure Jayant Sinha is
it's a good political
presenting
point.
An explanation, but this is an issue that is generating traction. You got elections in Gujarat, you got elections in Karnataka, in Himachal.
So and therefore, it's all the more important now to make a commitment that slowly everything should be under GST.
Correct.
And petroleum products should be under GST. And frankly, we've got to realize that the GST today is a flawed GST. You don't need to have 5 slabs. The 28% slabs is a ridiculously high slab. When you put things like cement, which is the largest user, the largest creator of jobs in India is housing, and cement is used in every house. And so you've done crazy things like that. So as we simplify, and I'm glad to hear that the government is planning to simplify GST. We should move everything
this has
into
been
GST.
A very
so it's gone out of political
heavily
pricing.
discussed, debated issue, the idea of bringing petrol, diesel under the ambit of the GST. So in the last part of this Board of India Today Economists, I want to focus now on whether demonetization will inflict more pain in the coming months. This has been a pain point, make no mistake about it. Whether it was ultimately beneficial to the economy is still up for debate. The critical question though is the worst behind us? Because I want to show you what P. Chidambaram is saying. P. Chidambaram put out a statement saying, I won't be surprised if growth rate slips for the 7th consecutive quarter. I expect very bad numbers for the July-September quarter of 2017. Jayant Sinha, you know, the BJP mocked Dr. Manmohan Singh when he said that GDP figure, the percentage will come down by 2% in the end. The Congress is saying he's the smartest economist there is, he was bang on. And even now you've got Chidambaram saying that July-September will be a lot worse than April-June. Are you bracing for that? Do you think Chidambaram's off out?
Any smart scientist knows, Rahul, that it's very difficult to attribute cause and effect with a complex system like the Indian economy. So I am much more humble about this. Of course, Dr. Manmohan Singh knows a lot more, so he can make those kinds of statements. I cannot attribute cause and effect in that simple linear fashion. I think demonetization is over. whatever effects were going to happen have long since subsided. The economy has been re-liquefied, we've remonetized. There's plenty of cash back in circulation. Digital payments have picked up. We are going through the GST transition, which is an important transition. And as I said, there is a profound structural change happening in the economy. And we'll have to see how all of these effects play themselves out. So I cannot, come up with some simplistic cause and effect analysis and come up with some simple number. But I do believe that when you look at the underlying drivers, the formalization of the economy, the infrastructure spending, the amount of fraud and corruption that was happening in the economy that's gone out, the level of FDI that's happening, the innovation that's happening, these are all very powerful structural fundamental drivers. Nobody disputes that. And now it's simply a matter of being a little bit patient, whether it's this quarter or the next quarter. All of this is going to kick in, and then we are really going to see long-term, stable, robust growth, and that's really what we need right now.
Arun Kumar, do you agree with this suggestion that the worst is behind us and that the bounce back is set to start?
No, as we discussed, the slide started 6 quarters back. And that accelerated due to demonetization, and that accelerated further because of GST. So it's not as if those things are going to turn around and the investment climate will improve, capacity utilization is not improved, since then. So my own fear is that actually the slide is going to continue, but there'll be fluctuations. Industrial rate of growth will go up and down, but on the trend it'll be going down. The unorganized sector, that is not yet recovering, and because of GST I think there's a further impact. So while notes have come back, these long-term implications of demonetization GST are through investment, through employment, through the impact on the unorganized sector, which is 93%.
Das, Arun Kumar seems to suggest it'll get a lot worse before it gets any better.
Yeah, well, I think, look, the this demonetization was a mistake. Now, what
I want to comment on that.
Let him finish. I want to comment on that.
What
I want to ask, why was it a mistake?
Can I
just
that's why I said. Can I just finish?
Yeah.
But the return of 99%, I think, is a good thing, because, and the government should take credit for it, because what you've got really is a success. That 99% of the currency has gone into the system, and in fact people are going to pay tax on it, and the people this is going to create jobs, and it's going to go into bank accounts. So instead of being negative about it, I feel that this is actually a real success.
No, but is the worst over, or is the worst some of the worst?
It's hard to say, but clearly jobs have been lost. And clearly today, I think our growth rate, it's always hard to say these things, but our growth rate would have been at least a percentage point higher today if it hadn't been for demonetization. Is the worst behind us?
Do you agree with Jayant Sinha, or do you think Arun Kumar is right when he says that it could get worse before it gets better?
Yeah, hard to tell, because I think, as I've stated several times, that a very large role, or very large part of the answer, will depend on what the RBI does, not on what the government does. And I consider the RBI is a separate unit. It's not that the government can tell the RBI to do or what not to do. Again, I keep coming back to that. If you tell me that, listen, and I want to ask all our distinguished economists over here, let us do a mental experiment. Economists are used to doing the counterfactuals. Let us say, given the problems with the GST implementation, everything else, tomorrow interest rates drop by 200 basis points. What do you think is going to happen?
RBI will say inflation will go up.
Huh?
RBI will say inflation will go up.
No. I'm asking the distinguished economists.
Sure.
Even the RBI will not say that. But let's ask my distinguished economists who say that interest rates don't matter. Or they matter, but really animal spirits matter more, momentum matters more, and mumbo jumbo. Ask Ashok Lahiri, he's a distinguished economist who thinks interest rates don't matter. I'm just answer my conceptual question. Interest rates drop tomorrow by 200 basis points. What do you think is going to happen to job growth? What do you think is going to happen to employment? What do you think is going to happen to manufacturing? What do you think is going to happen to payments? What do you think is going to happen to your pockets? You guys are talking about 5 rupees change in oil. That occupies half of our program, when the biggest elephant in the room you guys refuse to discuss.
I think, Rahul, you should have a separate
just answer the question.
On interest rates. But let me answer Surjit in a very simple way. instrument that RBI has is got the repo rate. Repo rate is the repurchase rate at which
We
the
know
RBI,
what that is. Don't obfuscate.
No, I'm not obfuscating. Everyone is not a wise man like you. There
No.
may be spectators who do not know.
Just take the
It's-
general
it's
interest rates.
Repo rate, that's the instrument at which RBI stands ready to lend to banks against collateral of government securities. Now, you know there is liquidity in the market. Banks are not devoid of funds. So even if the RBI were to reduce the repo rate, which it did, nothing much happened. See, interest rates are
Surjit
market
Balla is
determined.
saying, Gurcharan Das, that
No,
do
but
something dramatic. Instead of pushing for a stimulus on part of the government, push for a stimulus on the part of the RBI.
I'm actually with Surjit on this. I've always believed that interest rates in India were almost always too high. And I think maybe not 200. I would certainly opt for 100 basis points.
Rahul, for a mental experiment.
There was a saying
Let
in
me
the
just
IMF.
answer a show.
But can I
Let me
make
just
this
answer a
question?
show. Can I just answer a show?
Yes.
I mean, you know, you go through all this mumbo jumbo, simple thing. Let us take what will happen to your car loans. What will
How do
happen
you
to the price of
reduce
your
it?
car loans?
How do you reduce it?
What will happen to poor farmer loans? You know, they also take loans.
What
You
is
are
the
pretending as if
instrument?
the
What is
government
the
is doing
instrument? How
this.
does the RBI do it?
Surjit,
Are they Baba, it influences the whole rate? Yeah, you're an economist.
Of course, but the interest rates have been coming down, but the credit offtake has not taken off. It has come down historic low, become negative.
no, because-
Rahul, you must
Important
remember
question.
another thing.
NPAs
You must
are very
remember
high,
another
and
thing.
therefore the capacity to lend
The
to
businessmen
is very
will
low,
always
and
say
the
interest
twin
rates
balance
are
sheet-
too high and wages are too
The
high.
real rate
So I'm not
has gone
surprised
up.
by this.
The reason it's not
All
happening. Ashok, one second.
industrialists
No,
will
but-
always say wages
Baba,
are too high and
interest rates.
Interest
Listen,
rates.
previously,
Look at the financial
people were
crisis of
borrowing
2007-8.
at 14%.
2007-8
Right?
financial crisis,
And
the interest rates in
Dr.
US
Balla, the
etc. were down to almost zero, and yet the investment didn't take off.
But
You know, in
Dr. Lahiri,
2007-8.
No, but I think
makes an
look,
important point. You know, Surjit Balla, you must
Rahul,
answer this.
Surjit has
And I
a
want to
good
hear what
point,
Jan Sinha has to say, because the reality is interest rates have come down from the
And
14%
then not in
you
real
speak of
terms.
to about
Inflation
8
has fallen by 700
Yeah,
basis
inflation
points,
has fallen
and
much
interest rates are
worse,
down by
much more.
200 basis points. Simple math tells you that the real rate, the real cost, has gone up by 500
Where
basis
The
points.
inflation rate is
Rahul, I
incorrect,
don't think
the
this
one that you're
discussion
applying.
is too technical because the point
It's
is
not
whether-
technical.
Whether you have a backward-looking inflation expectation.
Oh
or
my
a
God, now we're
forward-looking
getting
one.
really technical.
Absolutely.
Oh, backward-looking inflation expectations.
Okay,
I've
one
got to
second.
figure out what each one of those words means.
Jan Sinha, I have one question. While there's a lot of talk about what Arun Jaitley and the Prime Minister may do when it comes to a stimuli package, Surjit Balla makes a very important point that if there is to be a real stimulus, in his belief, it has to come from the RBI. Now, the government has been winking, nudging the RBI, hoping that they reduce interest rates. They haven't really done so in the
And
dramatic,
I think the government needs to
drastic
be
fashion he wants.
complimented. They've kept their distance from the RBI. That is very good.
Okay. Is that really where the real stimulus could come from, Jan?
One of the profound structural changes that has happened to our economy is the fact that we have a monetary policy committee and we have an agreement between the government and the RBI that inflation should be within the 4 ± 2 range. That's a very important inflation targeting approach that we have adopted now. And of course, Surjit is right that real interest rates have to come down. It will put money in the pockets of consumers because their car loans will come down, farm loans will come down, housing loans will come down, people will go out and spend, capacity utilization will improve. So interest rates have to come down. It's very important. There are a series of other things that also have to happen. We need new industries to flourish, whether it's renewable energy, aviation has to grow, e-commerce has to grow, new industries have to flourish, exports have to go up, we have to continue to build new infrastructure. So it's never in a complex economy one or the other. It's always a combination of pulling the right levers in the right sequence that makes all the difference. I happen to believe that we are in fact doing that, and as we go through this adjustment, it is in fact going to result in an economy that is a much better, more competitive economy that can create jobs and really compete for the next 20, 30, 50 years. The economy that we had in the past was not set up to compete in the next 20, 30, 50 years against what the rest of the world is doing. What we are now building is an economy that is going to be globally competitive, it's going to create jobs, it's going to create entrepreneurial opportunities, and it's it's going to create the creative destruction that is required for an innovative economy to flourish. That's what the bankruptcy code is doing. It's allowing, you know, promoters to move on if they have not been able to succeed with their businesses. All these are very fundamental structural changes. That's really what we should be talking about and asking ourselves, are we doing the right long-term steps for the economy rather than worrying too much about what's happening in one quarter or the next quarter. What is happening long-term? Are we making the right moves? Everybody, I remember 2 or 3 years ago.
See, the issue today is people complain, why are the industrialists not investing? Well, they're not investing because there's not enough demand. They're not stupid. If there was demand, they'd be investing in factories. Well, one of the ways, we need many ways to stimulate demand, and one of the ways is lower interest rates. And Indian interest rates, Surjit is absolutely right, that inflation has fallen far faster than the interest rates have fallen. And so there is scope, definitely a scope. I would say 100 basis, you can go as much as 100 basis.
You know, I just quickly want to say that I think we're facing a real royal crisis. And this is the worst crisis the Modi government is facing. So far his timing had been brilliant. We thought demonetization, backing in GST, the structural changes, he timed it perfectly, and from now on the economy would grow. But I think, if you know, it's just not one measure, whether you're saying interest rates, he would have to come out, his government would have to come out with a slew of measures in the next 6 months to restore public confidence in the fact they've supported him on all these measures, but now he has to deliver, and particularly, as we said earlier, on jobs. If he doesn't do that, I don't think 2019 is that certain for this government.
Okay, I'm out of time, gentlemen.
Just one last second.
Yes.
As long as that fiscal stimulus is within the FRBM norms, I would not sacrifice.
That's a different debate.
That's a great victory for this government.
And that can be done by disinvestment.
They have done,
particularly in
targets be loosened is reason for us to call a second Board of India Today economist, and that would be a whole separate discussion. But this really, as Rachingappa says, is, make no mistake, the single biggest challenge confronting the Modi government, which is why we've put it out. We've invited these very sharp minds who've given us their assessment, their analysis, their understanding. The pundits have spoken. So this is where we end. Jai and Sinha for participating on this broadcast, for sharing with us your views. Thank you so much. Really appreciate this. We leave it to our viewers to distill what they will, and we will of course track very closely what Arun Jaitley and Prime Minister Narendra Modi do when it comes to announcing the stimulus package that's now being spoken about, whether it actually helps get the economy back on track, or as Surjit Bhalla says, forget what the government is doing, get the RBI to lower interest rates.
Not get the RBI to lower it. Let's hope they lower interest rates.
You keep saying that very nicely.
Yeah, no, it is. It's a very important
fine distinction.
RBI is an independent institution, and we all have to respect it, and the government has respected it.
Because as this story continues to remain in the headlines, I hope that we can do this again. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining.